Hey guys, tonight we step into a world drenched in sunlight and shadow, where golden walls gleam under the desert sun and incense wafts through painted corridors. But don't let the shimmering eyeliner and lotus-scented baths fool you. This isn't a fairy tale. You're waking up as a queen in ancient Egypt, and you probably won't survive this. Your bed is carved from cedar and inlaid with ivory, but comfort is a lie here. The moment your eyes flutter open, you're watched. Ladies in waiting hover, servants bow. But none of them are loyal, not to you anyway. They're loyal to the role you play. You're not a person in this palace. You're a symbol. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and your local time too. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids still flutter from sleep, but already the linen curtains are drawn back, sunlight harsh against gold-painted walls. Outside, the Nile glitters like a serpent, winding endlessly. You stretch, and even that gesture must be elegant. You are not alone. You are never alone. They dress you in layers of linen so fine it feels like breath against your skin. Gold bangles on your wrists, a collar of faience beads around your neck. You glance at your reflection in a polished copper mirror. The kohl around your eyes is darker than your thoughts, which, frankly, isn't hard. The palace is bustling already. Priests move like shadows, eunuchs bow, and the vizier, is already waiting with some scroll he insists needs your approval. Which is ironic, because your opinion only counts when it's convenient. Your title is magnificent, great royal wife. But make no mistake, this isn't a marriage, it's a power contract with eyeliner. You're here because your bloodline suits the throne. Your feelings? Decorative. Historians still argue whether Egyptian queens wielded true power or merely symbolic authority. Certainly, queens like Amos Nefertari held weight. But for most, your reign is not your own. You're a pawn wrapped in perfume and protocol. You walk down a corridor painted with lotus blooms and falcons. Every fresco whispers what's expected of you. To be serene, beautiful, eternal. You are a living goddess, or at least that's the propaganda. But you're also a woman who didn't sleep last night because a dream told you someone poisoned your fig wine. You pass through a garden where palms sway and servants sweep petals into patterns you'll never have time to admire. You sit beneath a pergola where the king sometimes meets you, when he remembers you're not just a decorative chair with jewelry. A servant kneels with a tray of pomegranate seeds and honey cakes. You take one, chew slowly. Somewhere in the palace, a woman is giving birth to a child who might someday challenge your son's right to rule. That's the real game. Inheritance, power, lineage, and all of it somehow sits in your womb, which means every meal could be your last. Every servant could be bought. Every smile could be strategy. It's exhausting, and it's only just after breakfast. You rise, flanked by fan-bearers, and move to the Hall of Appearances. Your role today is ceremonial, to stand beside the pharaoh as he accepts offerings and make speeches written by priests who never blink. You smile, you nod, you stand, for hours, in sandals that are, frankly, not designed for standing. The heat is stifling, sweat pools under your headdress, but you do not frown. You are not allowed to frown. The gods do not frown. There's a strange detachment to it all. You're surrounded by alabaster and gold, and yet you feel like a statue among statues. Posed, admired, but never quite alive. Behind you, in the gallery, lesser wives and concubines observe you with a mixture of awe and ambition. One of them caught the pharaoh's eye last week. She's 17, barely old enough to spell her own name, and already she dreams of your throne. You leave the ceremony to whispers, always whispers. You don't know if they envy or pity you, maybe both. Later, in your private chambers, a priestess arrives with an offering from the temple. Frankincense, oil, and a little folded prayer scroll. She says it's for protection. You accept it with thanks. Later, you'll hide it under your pillow, hoping the gods are paying attention. In the evening, you bathe in rosewater while harpists pluck melodies that only make you more aware of the silence inside your own head. Your thoughts flicker like torchlight. What if I fail to bear a son? What if someone slips mandrake into my wine? What if tomorrow the king favors someone else? You dry off and recline on your cushioned bench, pretending to enjoy a bowl of dates. They're too sweet. Everything is too sweet and too sharp at once. A handmaid enters with a message. The Pharaoh requests your presence. You don't ask why. You nod, stand, and let them paint your mouth red like blood. As you walk the corridor, your sandals click softly, like a countdown. You're a queen, but you feel like a prisoner in perfume. And the night is just beginning. The corridor grows colder the farther you walk, the torchlight flickering like it's reconsidering its loyalty. Ahead, carved lotus columns stretch tall and silent. The guards at the door nod, not to you, but to your status, which is only as solid as your last successful smile. Inside, the king's chamber smells of cinnamon and old stone. He sits on a lion-legged throne, one foot lazily hooked over the other. He's chewing something, maybe date, maybe gossip. You curtsy, fluid and flawless. You've done this 1,000 times. You could curtsy in your sleep. You probably have. He gestures you forward without looking up. You've heard about the marriage proposal? No, of course not. Because information comes to you last, after it's chewed through priests and pages and gossip like a papyrus scroll left in the rain. You nod anyway. Yes, my king. He finally glances at you. My cousin wants to solidify an alliance. He proposes his daughter, a younger bride. Pause. Wouldn't affect your place, of course. Of course. This is not personal. It's dynastic, strategic, completely normal. But the sourness in your stomach says otherwise. You smile as if your teeth aren't grinding. May the gods bless the match. He waves you off like a servant delivering figs. And that's it. No discussion. No feeling. You are not his equal, just the vessel for his heirs and the pillar to his public image. You leave the chamber in silence, not trusting your voice to stay steady. Historians still argue whether Egyptian queens had input in matters of succession or alliance. Some suggest powerful queens swayed royal policy behind closed doors, while others believe their influence stopped at the nursery door. Either way, tonight your voice went unheard. Back in your rooms, you sink into your cushions and remove your headdress with trembling hands. Your ladies-in-waiting pretend not to notice. You whisper to yourself, "He doesn't even remember our wedding night," which isn't fair. You barely do either. It was a blur of incense, chanting, and a room full of men watching to ensure the bloodline was preserved. You remember the coldness of the sheets more than the warmth of his touch. And you remember the way your mother whispered that love was a luxury queens could not afford. You thought she was being dramatic. You were wrong. Later that night, you walk through the garden, escorted by 2 guards who don't speak. Moonlight paints the lotus pond silver, and frogs chirp like they've never been hushed before. You pause beside a carved bench and sit, alone for once, quiet. That's when you hear them, voices, whispering, not far. You lean slightly toward the sound. 2 maids, not realizing you're nearby. Their tones are hushed, urgent. Says she's with child. The king might elevate her. Not if the queen gets to her first. Silence. Then a nervous giggle. Don't be cruel. You walk away before they see you. It's not cruelty that keeps queens in power. It's prevention. You return to your chambers and order your oldest servant to fetch a specific scroll from the palace library. The one about harem protocol. You read it by oil lamp, slowly, carefully, because if someone else is carrying the king's child, you'll need a plan. In the days that follow, the rumor spreads like desert wind. She's 15, beautiful, soft-spoken. Her name means jewel, and she's already being paraded through the palace like a precious offering. You see her once, briefly, during a ceremony. She stands 3 steps behind you, head bowed. But her eyes are darting, calculating. She knows exactly what she's doing. You offer her a smile with all the warmth of a temple sphinx. She curtsies low, her anklets jingling. And in that moment, you understand. This isn't about youth or beauty. It's about position. She wants yours. Quirky fact. Some Egyptian queens wore perfumes infused with myrrh and crocodile dung. believed to attract favor or ward off rivals. You consider requesting a blend. You also consider throwing it at someone. Instead, you play the long game. You arrange for extra offerings at the Temple of Hathor. You spend time blessing the sick. You make sure the palace scribes overhear you praying for the continued health of all royal children, born and unborn. And you wait, because in the court of pharaohs, battles are fought with smiles, incense, and suggestion. She never announces a pregnancy. A week later, she's sent to a northern estate for rest. They say, you never ask questions you don't want the answer to. You walk past the garden bench again that night and whisper to the lotus blossoms, "You were right, mother." Then you go back inside and sleep like someone who still has her crown. Your morning begins with the scrape of bronze against stone. Servants unlocking shutters and drawing aside the linen veils that shield your chamber from the prying sun. You're already awake. You've been lying there since before dawn, not thinking exactly, just listening. To whispers behind walls, to footsteps that pause too long outside your door, to silence that's far too deliberate. The palace is awake before the sun. Priests chanting somewhere far off. The soft whimper of a boy being scrubbed too hard in a cold basin. And the sound you hate most of all, a girl laughing. Hi, nervous. Somewhere near the harem wing. Today, you're not expected to attend a public ritual. Which means today you are truly being watched. Because when a queen is not visible, she is dangerous. You stretch, languidly, and let your ladies dress you. Russet linen, lapis beads, a touch of almond oil at the temples. The image of calm, regal, controlled. Even if, inside, you're rehearsing every sentence you'll say to the vizier during your casual garden walk. You pass through the east courtyard and enter the cloistered hallway leading toward the papyrus pavilion. It smells of lotus and ink, and something less pleasant. Secrets. Your footsteps echo, and the guards stationed every 10 paces nod without expression. You nod back, same face, same lie. It's here that the surveillance becomes real. Spies in every veil, eyes behind every curtain. And you've become fluent in the politics of posture. The vizier is waiting by the fish pond, feeding crumbs to the water lazily. His robe is lined with gold, but his eyes are empty of anything resembling comfort. Good morning, my queen. You incline your head. I trust the Nile hasn't swallowed any scribes this week. Not yet, but the water rises. And just like that, the dance begins. Historians still argue whether Egyptian queens wielded their power openly or only behind a curtain of courtesy. There's evidence of both. Powerful queens issuing decrees, others retreating behind layers of ritual. But you're walking a thread-thin line above a crocodile pit of gossip. You chat with the vizier about grain yields, festival preparations, and that charming new concubine the palace can't stop murmuring about. His smile doesn't flicker, but his eyes flick briefly toward the harem courtyard. He's aware. He's measuring your reaction. You give him none. Instead, you ask casually, has the temple construction been delayed? And the vizier, who always plays by the script, replies, only by weather and whispers. That tells you enough. Later, back in your chambers, one of your handmaidens, the one with eyes too quick for her mouth, offers you dried dates. As you reach for one, you pause. Did you select these yourself? She hesitates. The kitchen maid delivered them. I tasted one, my queen. That answer was too fast. You drop the date. This is the other half of being queen, the paranoia. The suspicion that your breakfast might be a tomb offering. That your wine might be seasoned. That even a gesture of kindness could be fatal. You've read the scrolls. Queens poisoned. Queens disappeared. Queens blessed with long sleep and hastily rewritten names. Quirky tidbit. Scorpions were sometimes used as silent weapons in palace rivalries. Slipped into bedding or shoes. And while crocodiles were sacred, scorpions were sacred and sneaky. You switch to figs instead. Later that day, you visit the embroidery house. On the surface, it's an act of piety, overseeing sacred vestments. In reality, it's reconnaissance. You listen to the weaver's chatter. Who is sick? Who is silent? who has suddenly begun dressing finer. One young girl catches your attention. She fumbles her needle and blushes when she sees you. "Your Highness," she stammers. "May I fetch more thread?" You nod, watching the way her eyes dart to the doorway before she bows. Later, you have her followed. The report returns before sunset. She visits a scribe in the scroll house. Young, handsome, newly promoted, possibly a cousin of a rival priestess. You do not act, yet, instead, you spend the evening arranging a donation to the temple of Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance. A subtle message for those who believe you've forgotten how to tip the scale. Before bed, a palace official visits to check on your health. He says the king has been concerned. His tone suggests that concern is less about your well-being and more about your reaction to recent changes. You reassure him, all smiles and smooth syllables. "I serve as the gods placed me, with grace." But inside, you're sharpening your next move. As you bathe, you think about the girl with the thread, the scribe with the promotion, and the vizier who never misses a chance to mention rising waters. There's something building. You just don't know if it's a storm or a trap. You dry off in silence, and sleep with a dagger beneath your cushion, just in case someone mistakes you for powerless. The day begins not with sunlight, but with wailing. Somewhere in the women's quarters, a shriek rises, sharp, raw, too sudden for ceremony. You're on your feet before your servants can even light the oil lamps. Your breath catches, not out of fear but recognition. That sound? It's the kind that only comes from a woman who's lost something she can never get back. A moment later, a runner appears at your chamber door, eyes wide. He doesn't need to say it, but he does anyway. The king's concubine, the young one, she lost the child. You close your eyes for the briefest second, let your breath steady. Then you nod, prepare a gift for her family, a ceremonial wreath, and summon the priestesses of Hathor for a cleansing rite. The boy bows, disappears into the corridors. Because even in grief, even when it is not your grief, you must perform the proper kindnesses. Queens cannot cry, but they can orchestrate compassion with brutal efficiency. You dress slowly this morning. Let the linen fall heavier. Let the coal lines sharpen a little more. You're not celebrating her misfortune, but you won't hide your composure either. In the mirror, you look serene, but behind your eyes, you're calculating. Because now the court will shift again. Eyes that had drifted toward her belly will refocus on you. Historians still argue whether miscarriages in royal harems brought shame or sympathy. In theory, all royal children were blessings. But in practice, every lost child was a lost opportunity, and sometimes a narrowly avoided threat. You walk to the inner sanctum, where offerings are being prepared. The air smells of myrrh and wet stone. A young priest chants a purification hymn. His voice cracks once, he's probably new. You nod as you pass, offering the smallest blessing with your hand. He bows so low he nearly drops the offering bowl. You enter the hall of birth, a dome chamber painted with scenes of Hathor nursing pharaohs, of women bent in labor beneath sacred trees. A place you know far too well. You've been here before, once with hope, once with pain, and always with silence. Your own labor was not announced. Queens give birth in seclusion, surrounded by midwives sworn to secrecy, in rooms thick with incense and whispered prayers. The moment the child draws breath, the entire palace holds its own. Your son, when he came, did not cry immediately. You remember the moment before his first gasp, when the world tilted, and your body clenched, and the midwife went still as if frozen in a statue's gaze. And then that sharp little wail, your first and only moment of true joy. You do not cry now, remembering. You simply place your hands on the altar stone, cold as judgment, and whisper a wordless prayer. May my son be strong. May no woman take his place. May no god forget my name. Later, you join the other royal women for a ceremonial meal. It is quiet, too quiet. The young concubine is not present, of course, but her absence hangs heavier than her presence ever did. Plates of lentils, pomegranate seeds, and honey cakes are passed. You take only water, a choice that itself becomes a statement. One of the elder wives, A woman with eyes like cracked alabaster leans close and murmurs, "She should not have danced so much. The baby was not ready." You say nothing. Another replies, "Or perhaps it was the figs. Some say they sour the womb." A third voice, sweeter and colder, says, "Or perhaps the gods did not favor her." You look up at that last one, a new girl barely 17. Her gaze flickers when you meet it. She smiles, but her lip twitches. You smile back, just a fraction wider, because here even grief is a battlefield. And if she is bold enough to speak like that, she's bold enough to try more. You file her name away in the part of your mind reserved for dangerous seeds. That night, your own child comes to you in a linen wrap, sleep-heavy and warm. He reaches for your necklace and giggles. You press your lips to his hair, so soft it might float away. He is still so small, so easily taken. And you are his only shield. You rock him until his breathing slows. Then you place him back in his cradle of cedar and ivory, a gift from the Nubian prince who once courted your sister. He's watched always, guards at the door, servants you think you trust. Charms hang from the lintels, blue faience hands, eye amulets, a tiny clay frog. Quirky fact: in ancient Egypt, frogs were symbols of fertility and rebirth. Hecate, the frog-headed goddess, presided over births. Her statues were tucked into bassinets and buried with stillborn children. You've placed 2 frogs in his cradle, one for life, one for protection. The next morning, word spreads. The concubine has been taken to a desert shrine for healing. Not exile, not punishment, just distance. But you know better. She will not return. Her place in the court has vanished, as if she were a mist burned off by sunrise. You dress in deep indigo and gold. Today, you are expected to appear at the palace temple for a feast honoring Isis, protector of queens and mothers. And oh, how perfectly timed. You kneel before the altar, arms raised. The priestess intones a hymn. You recite the ancient words with precision, because here devotion is power, and even the gods are listening. The temple is heavy with perfume and shadow, beams of sunlight slanting through lattice stonework in thin golden blades. You kneel on cool alabaster, palms pressed together, while acolytes chant verses written before your grandmother's grandmother drew breath. The goddess Isis stares down from the walls, serene, eternal, terrifying in her stillness. You know that look well. You wear it every day. Today's ceremony is meant to honor the sacred mother, the queen among goddesses, the mourner, the magician, the protector of kings, a divine mirror to your own role. You stand when the priestess gestures and offer a bowl of milk and honey to the carved altar. The bowl trembles slightly in your hand, not from fear, from fury, because you know the truth no scroll dares admit. Isis lost her husband. She raised her son alone. She carved power from grief, and no one tells her to stay quiet or sit pretty. You place the bowl down with grace, bow and step back. The acolytes resume their chant. You move to your ceremonial seat, high above the rest of the court women, and you feel their gazes brush across you like feathers dipped in envy. But envy can curdle into danger. Later, back in your chambers, you speak quietly to your steward. Have the royal food tasters pay doubled, quietly, and change the rotation schedule. He doesn't ask why. He doesn't need to. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian queens truly lived in constant fear of assassination, or whether modern dramatists have overstated the paranoia. But between the poisons, the rituals, and the politics of succession, it's safe to say you never leave your cup unattended. As the sun rises higher, you take your son to the palace gardens. He toddles beside you in a linen shift, clumsily chasing a cat who clearly wants none of it. His laughter echoes like tiny bells, pure, unscripted joy in a world that rarely offers such things. You kneel, straighten his collar, and point to the hibiscus bushes. Do you see those? He nods wide-eyed. They bloom when the gods are pleased. Are they pleased today? He asks. You pause, smile. They're watching, and we must give them something worth watching. A quirky fact: ancient Egyptians believed children were especially close to the gods, unburdened by deceit. Which is why royal children were often guarded more fiercely than the crown jewels. A breeze rustles the reeds beside the reflecting pool. You glance behind you. 2 guards stand a respectful distance away, close enough to protect, far enough not to hear, at least not with their ears. You return indoors just as a courtier arrives with news. The priestess of Seshet, goddess of wisdom, has requested your presence in the scribal hall. Unusual. Most royal women are kept far from official record-keeping. But you're not most. You arrive cloaked in white and turquoise, head high, steps measured. The scribal hall smells of ink, sand, and papyrus. Scribes pause as you pass, their styluses frozen mid-symbol. It is rare for a queen to enter this place, even more rare for her to be invited. The priestess rises. She's older than most stone statues, with a voice like parchment. We seek your counsel. Now that is a novelty. The issue: a temple in Memphis claims a grain shipment never arrived, but the palace treasurer says otherwise. Records differ. Offerings are missing. Accusations hover like vultures. You read the scrolls silently. Then you say, send an investigator from both temples. Let them journey together. What one sees, the other must witness. The priestess's eyes crinkle, not quite a smile. A wise ruling. You nod. You leave. You don't look back. In the hallway, you pass a young scribe scribbling something so fast he nearly drops his tablet. You catch his eye and say, record it clearly. He nods, blushes, scurries. Power isn't just about throne rooms and crowns. It's about where your voice is remembered. Later that afternoon, you recline in your solar, watching light ripple across polished stone. A servant fans you slowly, rhythmically. Another braids strands of your hair into patterns sacred to Hathor. And you think about Isis, about grain, about how every little thread you pull now weaves a future for your son. Then a letter arrives, sealed in beeswax stamped with the Pharaoh's crest. You break it open. The handwriting isn't the king's, it's the vizier's. The message is short, a warning veiled as flattery. There is movement in the harem. The youngest ones practice hymns not meant for their rank. You fold the letter slowly, place it into the fire, watch it curl. Then you whisper to no one in particular, let them sing, because you've already written your own hymn in scrolls, in stone, in suns. And if they want to challenge you, they'll need more than incense and hope. The night creeps in soft and violet, filtering through the carved stone screens that lace your private chamber. You lie on your couch of cedar and ivory, motionless except for your eyes, ever watchful. The ceiling above you gleams faintly with stars painted in lapis and gold. You'd once counted them as a child, believing each one could grant a wish. Now you know better. Tonight your body is heavy, but your mind will not rest. You send your attendants away early. I'll sleep alone, you say gently. They bow without question. Only one lingers, the oldest. Her hands wrinkled, her back bent, but her gaze sharper than most. She studies you for half a beat longer than custom allows. Then she leaves too. You let the silence stretch. It's rare here, precious. And in that silence you begin reviewing every name whispered lately, every glance held a second too long, every footstep that didn't match the usual rhythm of the guards on the eastern corridor. Something is off. The palace has a pulse and you feel it skipping. Historians still argue whether queens had their own spy networks independent from the king. But scrolls uncovered in Thebes suggest many royal women received private reports, written in code, delivered with incense bundles or through the placement of a single flower at the wrong time of day. Tonight, no messages arrive, which, frankly, tells you more than any scroll could. In the distance, the priestly chants from the temple of Thoth echo faintly. Words about wisdom, silence, patience. You half smile. Thoth would have made a decent queen. Instead, you rise and move to your private shrine. You light a cone of incense, kneel on the woven mat, and whisper to Hathor, to Maat, and, tonight especially, to Sekhmet. Because sometimes you don't need motherly love. You need fire. Behind your eyelids, you picture yourself in full ceremonial regalia. not veiled in linen, but armored in conviction. You've guided the palace through droughts, rivalries, illness, and childbirth. And now someone thinks they can maneuver around you. Quirky fact: some queens had personal physicians, men trained not only in healing but in detecting poison. They examined every meal, every poultice, every perfume. You once had such a man. He died in an accident involving a chariot and a servant girl who vanished that same day. You never hired a replacement. You simply trained your memory instead. You rise from the shrine and return to your divan. But you don't sleep, because tomorrow you will act. At dawn, the palace feels hushed. Not peaceful, just cautious, as if everyone's waiting to see who breathes first. You break the silence by ordering a midday gathering in the Queen's court, a space rarely used except for ceremonial receptions. The suddenness of your summons will make people talk. Good. Talking is how they show you their weaknesses. You dress in crimson today, rare, deliberate, and unforgettable. Crimson was sacred to Sekhmet, goddess of vengeance and power. As you walk the corridor, you feel the color ripple behind you like a warning. One by one, they gather. Senior priestesses, royal wives, trusted scribes. The vizier, of course. Always the vizier. You speak calmly, slowly, each sentence like a polished gem placed on a scale. The gods bless our house, but blessings must be tended. A garden neglected withers, or grows wild in ways that dishonor its keepers. They nod, murmuring approval. You continue. There are hymns being sung by voices not yet initiated, roles being rehearsed that were never assigned, and intentions unclear. Pause. You let that silence sit like a scorpion on the floor between you all. Then you smile. I have faith that loyalty will prevail. It always does. And that's it.
No accusations.
No names. But everyone leaves shaken. Especially the young priestess who avoids your eyes and spills her ink on the way out. Later that evening, the vizier visits. He brings sweet wine and sour news. There's been a theft, he says, pouring the wine slowly. A ceremonial necklace, meant for your son's naming day. You raise a brow. How careless. No locks were broken. Then someone had a key. He meets your gaze. You sip your wine. And that's all it takes. The next morning, the necklace is returned anonymously, placed at the foot of your shrine, wrapped in linen, no note. But now you know who to watch. You spend the day walking among the papyrus gardens, pretending to admire the birds. But you're counting footsteps again, listening to coughs, measuring silences. You speak with a steward about temple finances, but what you're really doing is confirming which servant sent that specific bundle of scrolls last week. You receive a blessing from the high priest of Ra, but what you're really noting is that he misquoted a line you corrected just 2 moons ago. It's like breathing underwater. Beautiful, terrifying, necessary. By sunset, your attendants dress you in soft teal for dinner with the Pharaoh. You haven't seen him in days. He's been consulting the gods, which usually means drinking heavily and letting other women rub oil into his temples. Tonight, you will be perfect, polished, serene, because tomorrow someone else won't be. You arrive at the evening meal as the last rays of the sun kiss the stone courtyard outside, casting long golden streaks across the polished floor. Your sandals click softly, a familiar rhythm in an unfamiliar moment. The air smells of roasted duck and saffron, but beneath it, there's something sharper, anticipation, the kind that rides the backs of jackals just before a hunt. The king is already seated, reclining, half a goblet into the wine and fully into disinterest. "Ah, my queen," he says without looking up. "Still walking on air? Only when the ground beneath me starts shifting." You reply smoothly, smiling. He finally glances your way, eyes flickering with amusement or suspicion. With him, it's often both. You sit beside him. Plates of figs and bread are passed. Honey trickles. Conversations ripple. But there's something else in the room tonight. You feel it before you hear it. The flicker of a smirk between 2 wives seated just out of the Pharaoh's reach. The too loud laugh of a courtier who owes you gratitude and fear. Then a whispered phrase floats across the chamber like incense. She has spies in every curtain. You don't turn. You don't react. You let them believe it, because sometimes fear is more effective than fact. Historians still argue whether the queen's influence extended into the harem's inner politics, or if her presence was kept strictly ceremonial. But if they think queens weren't listening, watching, recording every ripple of rivalry, then they clearly never studied what silence can do. The king chews slowly. We'll be traveling next week. To the southern temples. You blink. Travel was not part of your planning. But you nod. May the gods bless our journey. He snorts. You'll stay here. Ah, of course. He's going with someone else. The laughter, the whispers, the wine. It all clicks together now like beads on a string. You sip your wine and smile. Then I'll ensure the palace doesn't burn down while you're gone. He chuckles. But you mean it. After the meal, you withdraw early. Too early. But again, strategic. You let them wonder if you're wounded. Then, back in your quarters, you begin. You summon the chief of the household guard. Quietly, after dark. A man loyal not by heart, but by debt. A debt you ensured never gets paid in full. There will be guests arriving in 2 days, you tell him. I want a full list of who steps through that gate. And where they sleep. He bows. Shall I question them? You wave a hand.
No.
Let them talk to each other. I just want to know when. You spend the next morning in the archives. Not for scrolls, but for faces. You request the ledgers from last year's flood offerings, pretending to inspect temple donations. What you're really doing is reviewing which priest's nephew was quietly elevated after a harem girl became mysteriously favored. You make notes. That afternoon, a gift arrives from the southern temple. A simple linen wrap containing a fertility idol and a bundle of myrrh. Traditional, respectful, expected. You send back a thank you note laced with perfectly neutral blessings. But you set the idol aside, unburned. Because idols don't need your prayers. They need your patience. Quirky fact, in ancient Egypt, myrrh wasn't just burned for scent. It was a preservative, used in mummification. It made things linger. You smile at the irony. 2 days later, the palace fills with movement. Musicians tuning lyres in the East Hall. Dancers practicing in the garden. Messengers rushing from one gate to the next like beetles on hot stone. You hear that the concubine chosen to accompany the king is delicately ill and may not travel after all. How unfortunate. You sit at your vanity and let the youngest servant girl apply carnelian powder to your cheeks. You're so calm, my queen, she says quietly. You meet her eyes in the mirror. Because I've already survived worse than today. She swallows and lowers her gaze. By nightfall, the harem is locked down. Official reason. A miscount of ceremonial oils. Unofficial reason, you issued an order. One girl, the loud-laughing one, is reassigned to the northern estate. Another disappears entirely, returned to her family. Though no one seems to remember which family that was. You've drawn no blood. You've used no names. But the silence afterward is louder than screams. Later, you walk to the garden alone. The moon is high, the reeds sway, and you remember something your mother told you long ago. A queen's best armor is the memory of what she's already endured. You kneel by the lotus pond, fingertips grazing the surface. And you whisper, let them try. The sun rises with a strange stillness the next day, the kind that makes birds quiet and servants walk slower. Even the palace dogs seem subdued, lounging like statues along the walls. Something has shifted. You feel it in the stone under your feet. The vizier arrives before breakfast. That alone is notable. He doesn't usually appear until the sun has warmed the eastern walls and the gossip of the palace has made at least one full lap around the garden pool. He bows. My queen. You raise an eyebrow. You're early. I thought it prudent. He straightens. There's news from the harem. Whispers. Factions forming. You already know, of course. But you tilt your head like you're intrigued. Tell me. There's a group. Younger women. One of them claims her family descends from Thutmose's line. Distant, but close enough to imagine herself stepping into light. You finish. He doesn't nod, but his silence agrees. You rise slowly, smoothing your linen robes. Then we'd better cast a longer shadow. Historians still argue whether the harem was a prison or a playground. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. Queens ruled it with smiles and steel, and sometimes the smallest tilt of a scented fan could seal someone's fate. You spend the morning in the harem garden. It's a deceptively lovely space. Palm trees sway gently, birds peck at crumbs left near the reed beds, and somewhere, a harp strums a melody too old to be remembered properly. The women gather in small groups, pretending not to organize themselves like chess pieces. You pass them all, offering nods, tiny greetings, the occasional compliment, until you reach her, the one with eyes like wet bronze, the one who once bowed too low and lingered too long. Today she rises when you approach. "Your Majesty," she says, low and smooth. You study her. "Do you enjoy music?" "I live for it." Then perhaps you'd consider overseeing the next offering ceremony. Pause. "Publicly." She blinks once, carefully. "It would be an honor." You smile. "Wonderful." Then you walk away, because what you've just done is brilliant. You've placed her in the sun, given her visibility, elevated her just enough that the other women will see her as a rival worth watching and whispering about. You've made her a target. And nothing weakens a coalition faster than its most ambitious member being singled out. Quirky fact, ancient Egyptian women, especially those in royal circles, often wore gossip jewelry, tiny amulets shaped like ears or mouths, to attract favorable whispers or eavesdrop on rivals. You don't need amulets. You have servants, and daughters of bakers, and one particularly talkative girl who braids hair. You stop by her quarters next. She curtsies so fast you fear her forehead might dent the floor. "My queen, tell me," you say gently, "which of the younger ones has been asking about court law?" Her mouth opens, closes, opens again. "The girl from Heliopolis, the one with the scented scrolls." Of course, scented scrolls. No one who knows power wears it that loud. You leave with a nod. That night, a royal edict is issued. All court literature will now be reviewed by temple scribes before distribution to the harem. "To preserve purity," it says, "and avoid blasphemous interpretation." What it really means is, stop passing notes. I'm reading everything now. By the next morning, the tension is sweet as overripe dates. Your son is brought to you before breakfast. He's sleepy-eyed, clutching a wooden lion toy. You lift him into your arms and press your forehead to his. "Do you know why lions don't fear snakes?" You whisper. He shakes his head. "Because they don't waste time watching them. They act." He grins like it's a riddle, not a lesson. He's too young, but one day he won't be. You set him down and signal the nursemaid. Then you write a short note, not to the king or the vizier or even the priests, to the girl from Heliopolis. You invite her to join you for a private lesson in court history. Because what better way to dismantle a threat than to educate it? She arrives at dusk, dressed too finely, perfume too strong. You keep your tone warm, your smile gentle. You hand her a scroll, the history of Queen Sobenferu. "Read it aloud, will you?" She does, badly, haltingly. Halfway through, she skips a passage. One you know she didn't miss accidentally. You stop her. "That part. Why did you leave it out?" She flinches. "I thought it was less relevant." "It wasn't." Silence. Then you say, "Be careful which parts of history you ignore. They have a way of repeating themselves." She bows. "Yes, my queen." And when she leaves, you don't summon guards. You don't exile her. You simply start sending her one new scroll every week, until she learns that power isn't seized. It's absorbed. The morning haze clings to the palace walls like memory, thick, slow, and almost sacred. You wake before the servants again, not because of some divine dream or heavenly calling, but because your thoughts simply never stopped the night before. You walk alone through the western wing, trailing your fingers along walls painted with stars and jackals. This is the oldest part of the palace. Fewer people come here now. Too many ghosts, too many echoes. You like it. It's where you first chose the site for your tomb. Yes, yours. Because queens don't wait to be buried. They plan it, sculpt it, fund it, approve the color schemes and the hymn selections. You stop before a painted panel of the goddess Nut arched across the heavens. Beneath her, the royal bark sails across the underworld. Your name is already painted in miniature at the bottom. Not because you're morbid, but because names carved in stone live longer than hearts. Or so you hope. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian queens were truly involved in the planning of their own tombs, or if that was a matter left to priests and male heirs. But in the records, your presence is everywhere. In budget scrolls, in quarry orders, in correction notes about pigment. You even rejected a proposed wall carving last month because the artist made your nose look too ambitious. Today, you're meeting the stonemason again. You take a back passage out to the northern cliff, past the shrine of Sekhmet, past the wild fig tree that the gardeners still can't prune properly. The air is dry and sharp. The workers bow when they see you coming. The tomb entrance is half finished. The lintel stone already inscribed with symbols of eternity. The ankh, the scarab, the falcon. You stand beside the chief mason and nod slowly. Smooth the arch, you say. It looks like it's frowning. Yes, my queen. You crouch to inspect the base carvings. One line of hieroglyphs is misaligned, barely but still. You run your thumb along the groove. This will carry my name beyond time. Let it not look rushed. No, my queen. You straighten, brushing dust from your fingers. As you do, you glance at the other workers. One of them, a young boy, is watching you with wide eyes. He looks startled, but not afraid. Do you know who I am? You ask. He nods. You're the queen who walks her own tomb. You smile. Exactly. And then you leave him with that thought because mystery is a better shield than guards. Back at the palace, your steward brings a problem. There's a dispute over your burial treasure, my queen. One of the goldsmiths claims he hasn't been paid in full for the lion-headed amulet set. You sigh. Have the payment scroll retrieved. And if it's been adjusted? Then find who adjusted it and ask them whether they prefer banishment or blindness. The steward does not ask which you recommend. Quirky fact. Some royal burial caches included fake scrolls and counterfeit gold. Not to deceive tomb robbers, but to confuse them. A queen who planned well could send thieves in circles while her true treasures slept untouched beneath false walls. You visit your treasure chamber just before midday. It's hidden behind 3 doors, 2 of which are ceremonial. The guards there are deaf, trained not to listen to anything, not even screams. Inside, chests of lapis, ivory, obsidian, scrolls sealed with wax and curses, amulets shaped like cobras, hippos, and hearts. One shelf holds a bundle of papyrus labeled only with a single glyph, silence. You check every seal. Nothing has been disturbed. Not yet. Later that day, a priest arrives with a humble request to revise your funerary hymn. We've discovered an older verse that may please the gods more. You don't even blink. The gods are already pleased with my original version. He bows. Of course. You add his name to the list of people you'll never trust with incense again. That night, you sit beside your son as he sleeps, watching the rise and fall of his chest. You hold one of his sandals in your hand, small, worn, with a patch near the heel where he drags his foot when he runs. One day this room will be his. One day this kingdom will be his, unless someone gets to him first. You place the sandal back where it belongs, beside a carved toy lion, and whisper a few words to the goddess Taret, protector of mothers, childbirth, and the vulnerable. She's often forgotten in the grander temples. Not glamorous like Isis, not powerful like Sekhmet. But you like her. She has teeth. The moon is high when you slip outside again, back to the western wall, back to the tomb. You place one palm against the stone, warm from the day. You will not forget me, you murmur. And even if stone can't answer, you believe it listens. You wake with sand in your throat. Not real sand, of course, just the feeling of too many dry breaths taken in a night too heavy with thought. Morning breaks sluggishly. The air smells of dust and hot linen. Someone spilled oil in the eastern hall, and now it clings to the walls like a shame no one will admit to. You rise before your attendants enter, which always makes them nervous. Queens aren't supposed to dress themselves, it disrupts the hierarchy. But today you want quiet, time to think, because today you will become a goddess. Not in the poetic sense, in the official, temple-validated, painted in ochre on stone sense. The ritual begins just after the sun clears the palace walls. You are escorted to the House of Life, the temple complex dedicated to healing, wisdom, and ritual purity. It is also where your divine elevation will be declared. You have done this before, of course. Twice, in fact. The first time, as a girl of 13, when you were pronounced beloved of Hathor, and painted with blue lotus dye while everyone else pretended not to notice you cried through the entire ceremony. The second time, when you gave birth. The priest said your womb had been blessed by Isis herself. This is the third. And third rituals are serious. The priests line the courtyard in linen white, chanting from scrolls so old the ink has faded to dust-colored stains. You are anointed with oil, 5 types, each representing a sacred principle. Life, breath, sight, truth, endurance. You do not flinch when the oil runs cold. Historians still argue whether these divine roles were symbolic or genuinely believed, whether queens were revered or merely tolerated in their ritual functions. But as you stand here, bare feet on sun-baked stone, heart thudding beneath layers of symbolism, one truth is clear. This performance has teeth. At the climax, you are draped in indigo and gold. Your arms are raised not by choice but by custom. A priest declares you the living image of Mut, she who mothers the kings. You say nothing, because your silence is power. Later, back in your quarters, you peel off the heavy linen and sit motionless while your hair is rebraided. You're exhausted, but not from the ritual, from the expectations. Because now that you're a goddess, no one will let you be human. One of your maids, wide-eyed and reverent, says, "You looked so calm, like you'd floated away." You smile gently. That's what divinity feels like. Levitation and sweat. She laughs, then looks horrified at herself. You wave it off. Go fetch the honeyed dates. She stumbles out, grateful. You lean back, because being a goddess doesn't mean you can't be sarcastic. It just means you have to do it politely. You attend the king's court that evening, standing at his left as he receives petitions. You're not required to speak, merely to glow, to radiate silent approval like a human moon. A trader from the southern mines bows, offers gold. A priest accuses another priest of heresy. A boy is declared the son of no one. You remain silent through it all, eyes forward, expression unreadable. But inside, you note everything. Quirky fact: queens often communicated through gestures. A single shift in posture could signal approval. A hand on a chair's edge might mean disapproval. You've perfected yours to an art form. The vizier catches your eye during the trial of the priest. You tilt your head just slightly. He says, "Let this matter be reviewed in private." Exactly. Later, as the moon rises, you walk alone in the gardens. The scent of jasmine is thick. You feel a presence, not ghostly, just familiar. One of your rivals. The one with the bronze eyes. She appears beside you as if by accident. "My queen," she says, sweet as pomegranate wine. "I hear the gods favored you today." "They always do," you reply softly. She walks a few steps with you. "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," you murmur, "is already written. By the gods." You smile. "By me." She stops walking, and you keep going. Because queens who pretend to be goddesses must also learn to wield prophecy. Not just in words, but in certainty. Before bed, you visit your son. He's asleep, one arm thrown above his head, mouth open in that drooling way only toddlers can get away with. You adjust his blanket, brush hair from his brow, kiss his cheek, and whisper, "One day you'll understand. Being a god isn't a gift. It's armor." He doesn't stir. You slip out of the room and into the corridor. There, waiting silently in the dark, is a courier. He hands you a scroll.
No waxil.
Inside, one sentence. "They've begun invoking your name in private prayers." You close the scroll. Tuck it into your sleeve. Because that's how a mortal becomes more than myth. The next morning arrives without ceremony. No chants, no oil, no scented offerings. Just a breeze from the Nile and a sky the color of old copper. You rise slowly, stretch. Your body reminds you, not so gently, that divinity still comes with sore joints and stiff shoulders. Today, though, you feel something else stirring. The shadow of another woman. Hatshepsut. Her name returns like the scent of frankincense from a distant hall. Faint, sweet, but unmistakable. She had once been what you are now, and then more, not queen but Pharaoh. A woman who wore the false beard, who stood before the gods not beside a king, but as the king. You've been thinking of her more and more, and not just because the priests would rather you didn't. You step out onto your terrace, where the morning sun brushes your skin like a cautious servant. Below, the city hums. Merchants shout, donkeys bray, boys chase each other past guards who pretend not to notice. You turn to your steward. Bring me the archive scrolls, the ones from Deir el-Bahari. He blinks. My queen, those are restricted. You finish. So is ambition. Bring them. He bows and leaves. Historians still argue whether Hatshepsut ruled as co-regent with her stepson or pushed him aside entirely. Whether her reign was celebrated, tolerated, or merely endured. But what they do agree on is this: her memory was nearly erased. Her images defaced. Her cartouches chiseled out. As if Egypt itself wanted to forget her daring. Which, of course, means she was dangerous. And that means you need to understand her. The scrolls arrive by midday. They're old, fragile, smelling of cedar and regret. You unroll them carefully, reading by the filtered light of your private solar. One line strikes you like a slap. She ruled not as woman, but as Ma'at, order made flesh. You whisper the words again. Ma'at, balance, justice, divine truth. And suddenly you wonder, were they terrified of her not because she broke the order, but because she became it? That evening, you request a carving from the court artisans, a miniature of a seated woman wearing both crown and beard. For study, you say, and reflection. The artist blinks. Shall I make it resemble? No, you interrupt gently. It resembles itself. You're not copying her. You're learning from her. You walk through the palace halls slowly that night, trailing your fingers across painted murals that only ever show men leading armies. Men receiving tribute, men building temples. And yet, who paid for those temples? Who educated those heirs? Who kept the royal line unbroken? You reach the library and find a poem etched into a clay tablet. Her footsteps cracked the stone, and the gods called it thunder. You smile. Someone remembered. Quirky fact: there are hidden shrines in some temples, small alcoves behind larger sanctuaries, dedicated to female rulers or goddesses rarely spoken of. You once visited one, pretending to seek solitude. You left a single lotus petal on the altar. When you returned days later, it was gone. That night, in your bath, your attendant asks, "Is it true she made herself Pharaoh?" You nod. It is. Wasn't she afraid? You look into the water. Your reflection ripples. She might have been, but fear isn't disobedient. It just travels with you. The girl goes quiet. The next day, a priest from Karnak arrives. He offers incense and vague praise, then casually mentions that a new festival in honor of Hatshepsut has been proposed by a few misguided temple scribes. You tilt your head. Misguided. He hesitates. Such examples encourage wildness in women. You meet his gaze. And yet, Egypt still stands. He says nothing more, but you add his name to the list of people who will no longer be invited to your ceremonies. That afternoon, you walk the causeway leading from the palace to the river. You imagine stone statues of forgotten queens lining its path. Women who served, ruled, whispered, fought, and were reduced to footnotes. You murmur their names under your breath, one by one. The ones you've read, the ones you've guessed, the ones who deserved cartouches but got shadows instead. And you promise them this: you will not be erased. Because history remembers what is carved deep enough. And you've already chosen your stone. The Nile is high this week, swollen and muddy, sloshing at its banks like a serpent that's had its fill. You watch it from your garden pavilion, where the shade offers little relief but at least gives the illusion of coolness. Flood season always brings the same tension, gratitude and dread. Too little water and the crops die. Too much and homes collapse. There's no perfect balance. Rather like queenship, a messenger arrives as you sip barley water. His robe is damp from travel, and his eyes do that thing messengers' eyes do when they carry something delicate. Flicking between your hands, your jewelry, your mood. He kneels. My queen, the oracle of Khnum requests your presence. You blink once. That's new. The god Khnum, the ram-headed potter of creation, isn't often involved in court affairs. He deals in floods, fertility, shaping human life from clay on his divine wheel. He's more practical than political. But when oracles speak, queens must listen. The journey upriver is long and stifling. You travel in a private bark, painted with lotus blossoms and trailed by guards who pretend they're invisible. The oarsmen chant softly to keep rhythm. Somewhere behind you, a bird shrieks, sharp and sudden, like a warning. You arrive at the temple by dusk. The oracle awaits, a woman swathed in ochre and beads, her hair bound in lapis cords. Her skin is cracked from years of incense smoke, and her eyes are milk-white with age. She greets you without ceremony. You have too many names, she says. You blink. I beg your pardon? She reaches out and touches your arm, gently, like dust. You are mother, wife, queen, goddess, memory, and ghost. You don't answer. She leads you into the sanctuary, cool, dark, alive with candlelight and silence. There is a storm coming, she whispers, and you are standing on the only dry rock. Historians still argue whether Egyptian oracles had political influence or were merely symbolic figures used to soothe crowds. But you know real power when you hear it, and this woman's voice holds centuries. You kneel, not out of piety, out of strategy, because you don't need to control the storm. You just need to be the one who survives it. She gives you a gift, a simple amulet shaped like a ram's horn, carved from bone and strung on a frayed cord. For your son, she says. How will he know what it means? He will ask. You return to the bark in silence, the sky now smeared with stars. You sleep little that night, the amulet resting on your chest like a weight that hums. The next day, you summon the royal scribe. I want new temple scrolls commissioned, you tell him. On Khnum, include references to the queen's role in divine creation. He hesitates. That isn't standard interpretation. You fix him with a gaze that could split granite. Then we will create a new standard. He nods. Quirky fact. Egyptian theology was famously flexible. Gods merged, evolved, borrowed traits. If you chanted something often enough, with enough incense and enough repetition, it became true. By week's end, temple artists are painting murals of Khnum shaping not just men, but queens, from clay. You walk past the unfinished wall one afternoon and pause. Make her hands open, you say, gesturing to the figure of the queen. Open? The artist repeats. Yes, ready to receive or to strike. He adjusts the sketch. Back in the palace, the political mood is twitchy. The king's absence stretches on. The vizier's smile tightens. The priests start dropping phrases like divine patience and the sacred quiet. You know what it means. They're bracing for something. One night, you meet with your most trusted advisor, an older woman who served your mother and her mother before that. She lights a small lamp. They're testing how far you'll stretch before you snap. And she pours tea. Stretch too far and you break. Snap too soon and you bleed. You sip. And if I bend in their direction, only to spring back when they've relaxed? She smiles. Then you win. That evening, your son brings you the amulet. Is this mine? He asks. You nod. From a wise woman. What does it do? You crouch beside him. It reminds you that you were shaped by gods. But you decide how you're finished. He frowns. Finished. When your story is done. He studies the horn. Then I want mine to be loud. You laugh and it echoes off the painted walls. Later, alone again, you return to the pavilion. The Nile has receded, leaving silt and silence. The moon reflects in the water, smeared and flickering. You whisper, "Let the flood come," because your roots run deeper than any tide. You wake to drums, not ceremonial ones, not the gentle thrum of temple hymns or the lazy rhythm of festival preparations.
War drums.
They don't come from inside the palace, but from the city beyond its gates, from the outer districts, where words like loyalty and divinity are traded for bread, copper, and rage. The palace responds like a beast poked in its sleep. Guards multiply, doors that haven't been locked in years grown closed. Servants whisper as they walk, their trays shaking more than their hands. You do not flinch. You do not ask for updates. You dress in ochre and gold, not as a queen trying to inspire peace, but as a goddess who expects obedience. By mid-morning, the vizier arrives. He bows, but not too low. "My queen." There have been protests near the northern granaries. "Protests," you echo. "Or preambles?" He hesitates. "They demand reforms. Food distribution, access to the temples. And who is speaking for them? Not one leader. Many voices. Too many." You nod slowly. Then they must not be allowed to find one, because a single voice becomes a martyr. But 1,000 voices just become noise. Historians still argue whether queens played active roles in quelling unrest, or simply watched from balconies while men solved problems. But you've never been interested in good views. Only good outcomes. You summon your personal guard. Not the palace troops, the ones who owe you directly. The ones whose wives you've clothed, whose sons you've promoted, whose secrets you've kept safe in scrolls hidden behind your altar. "I want control of the granaries," you say. Effective today. They don't ask how. They just bow. By afternoon, carts filled with barley, lentils, and dried fish roll into the affected districts, bearing your seal. Not the king's. Yours. Quirky fact. Ancient Egypt had female grain overseers. Rare, but real. One queen once disguised herself as a grain scribe during a famine to uncover hoarding nobles. She returned with proof and 3 names. None were seen again. You take lunch beneath a sycamore tree, the same one you planted years ago to mark your son's naming ceremony. The shade is wide now, strong. He joins you barefoot and dusty. "They say people are angry," he says, biting into a date. "They are. Because they're hungry?" "Yes." He frowns. "Can't we just feed them all the time?" You smile. "We could. But then some will still want more." "Like more than food?" "Like power." He looks puzzled. "But don't we already have that?" You place your hand on his. "Only if we know how to share it, and how to defend it." The palace is quiet when you return. Too quiet. One of your scribes intercepts you. "There's a message, my queen, from the high priests." Of course there is. They don't like you moving grain without their blessing, or blessing the people directly, or existing without their permission. The scroll is short. Stability is divine. Chaos opens doors. You send no reply. Instead, you write your own message on thick papyrus in crimson ink. A goddess does not knock. She enters. You have it delivered to the high temple with a bundle of fresh bread. Symbolism matters. That night, you meet with the palace treasurer. "I want to redirect part of the temple tithe to public works." He blinks. "That's controversial." "No," you say, sipping wine. "That's visible." He adjusts his robes. "You'll make enemies." You shrug. "They can stand in line." Later, you walk alone through the palace's outer corridor, where the pillars are painted with stories of past queens. Most are shown in passive poses, holding flowers, standing behind kings, looking adoringly at sons. You run your fingers over one figure, barely half your height. "Smile more," you whisper to her. "It'll scare them." That night, as you lie awake, a servant girl enters with a message. "You shouldn't be here this late," you murmur. "I know," she says, "but I wanted to say thank you. My brother works in the grain yard." He says your name kept him safe today. You nod. Tell him to keep working. I will. She lingers. Then, are you scared? You pause. Yes, but not of them. Of what then? You look to the ceiling painted with stars. Of how far I'm willing to go. And she doesn't understand. But one day someone will. The desert wind shifts overnight. It brings no storm, no clouds, just the dry kiss of change. You feel it in your teeth, in your bones, in the way even the servants seem to pause half a second longer before speaking your name. By dawn, the palace is a hive. Whispers swarm like flies. The king is returning. You don't panic. You don't preen. You prepare. Not for his affection, but for his scrutiny. Because while you've been managing grain riots and temple politics, he's been basking in tribute ceremonies and whatever favor the southern concubines offer under moonlight. You select your robes with care. Nothing too new, nothing too grand. Just familiar, regal, steady. The sort of ensemble that says, I never needed you to begin with. When he arrives, the procession is appropriately absurd. Trumpets, dancers, gift-bearers from Nubia and incense thick enough to choke half the palace. You wait at the top of the stairs, eyes shaded by a linen veil, posture perfect. He dismounts from the chariot, smiles. My queen, my king. He leans in, kisses your cheek, then mutters near your ear. I heard you've been busy. You smile without teeth. Idle hands invite rebellion. Historians still argue whether royal marriages in ancient Egypt were emotional partnerships or strictly political contracts. But you've always known the answer. They were both. And neither. Later, over a formal dinner, the king holds court. He boasts about a lion hunt. You suspect it was a goat. He displays a new leopard pelt. Still stinks of vinegar. And he speaks glowingly of a southern oracle who claimed his reign was blessed by the sun god himself. Which god? You ask sweetly.
Da?
Or Aten. I hear they're taking turns lately. The court chuckles carefully. He narrows his eyes. You've gotten clever in my absence. You sip wine. I've always been clever. You've just been absent. A beat. Then he laughs. And just like that, the tension breaks. Temporarily. You know how to win these moments. But you also know how short they last. After the feast, you walk the garden alone. The moonlight glints off pond water like coins waiting to be claimed. You hear footsteps. Not a servant's shuffle, not a child's scamper. The king. I had a dream, he says. Congratulations. He chuckles. In it you were wearing white, all white, and speaking to the gods. You turn slowly. I often do. They listened. Why wouldn't they? They feared you. Now that makes you pause. You study him, the way his fingers twitch near his robe, the way his jaw sets too tightly for comfort. You know what fear means? You ask. He shrugs. It means you're real. He doesn't reply. You go on. Imaginary queens are lovely, decorative, quiet, but real ones? They're complicated. Quirky fact. In royal tombs, depictions of queens grew more elaborate over time. Early ones stood behind kings. Later ones stood beside them. A few were shown ahead, holding the ankh and leading the way to the afterlife. Back in your chambers, you receive a scroll from the priesthood. A formal complaint. Your grain redistribution has interfered with divine economics. Your commissioning of new hymns borders on doctrinal innovation. You toss the scroll on the brazier. Let it burn. Your steward watches, mouth agape. You smile. Divine economics. You repeat, amused. What will they call theft next? The next morning you host a ceremony. A quiet one. Just mothers and widows. Just prayers for rain and safety. Just the sort of public gathering that happens outside the temples. You don't lead it. You stand among them. And someone paints it. 2 days later, the painting appears anonymously on a palace wall. The queen standing barefoot in the dust. Hands raised with the common women. No crown.
No guards.
Just presence. It spreads. By the week's end, merchants are carving tiny figurines of you into amulets. Not sanctioned. Not royal. Just theirs. You don't stop them. Because gods are shaped by belief, and yours is beginning to solidify in clay and rumor. That night, the king visits your chambers. He says nothing at first, just watches the brazier glow. Finally, you've made yourself too large. You look up. No, the world just shrank to fit me. He doesn't answer, and you let the silence do the rest. You rise before dawn on what feels like the last day of an old age. The palace is still. No drums.
No distant chants.
Just the soft flap of linen curtains and the whisper of sandals on polished stone. Even the birds delay their singing, as if waiting for your signal. You dress in ivory linen today, unpatterned, unadorned, perfectly pressed. You wear no crown.
No necklace.
Just a single ring passed down from a queen whose name was long ago chipped from her sarcophagus. Fits perfectly. You walk the eastern hall slowly, trailing your hand along the carved reliefs. Scenes of offering, of harvests, of gods smiling benevolently upon crowned men. You pause at one figure, a queen, kneeling, holding out a lotus. You touch her face, and whisper, "Stand up." Outside, the city is waking. Traders lift tarps from their carts. Priests unseal the temple gates. Children splash water from stone troughs while their mothers pray under their breath. And the whispers continue, that the queen is seen in dreams, that her footsteps bless soil, that she once silenced a cobra with a look. They're exaggerated, of course. Mostly. Court, the king is already seated. He looks tired, older. His skin a little duller under the weight of crowns and compromises. You enter without announcement. "My queen," he says. Not cold, not warm. Just tentative. "My king," you reply. "Shall we begin?" The council assembles. You listen. You speak little. But your silences speak louder than the vizier's entire soliloquy on barley tariffs. One proposal stands out. A suggestion to formalize divine roles, to restrict ritual authority to priests and male royals. You tilt your head. So the gods speak only to men now? The priest clears his throat. "We merely mean to clarify channels." "Then clarify this," you say softly. "When the people cried out last month, who answered? When the granaries opened, whose seal was on the carts?" Silence. "Then yours, my queen." "And when the hymns rose from the outer courtyards, who led them?" Again silence. You lean forward. "Then I suggest you don't close a channel the gods clearly favor." Historians still argue whether queens held religious authority as a right or a courtesy. But you've proven it doesn't matter because belief isn't given. It's earned. That night, you walk the palace rooftop alone. Below, torches flicker along the avenue of sphinxes. In the distance, the Nile gleams like a thread pulled through dark velvet. You think of the girl you once were. The girl braided into perfection. Told to smile. Told to bow. Told to wait. You whisper to her, "We did not wait." Then you whisper to the air, "And we are not done." In the morning, the painting is finished. Not on a palace wall, but on a temple facade impossible to miss. You standing barefoot, not bowed, not veiled. One hand outstretched to the sun, the other holding your child's hand. You don't commission it, but you do not stop it. Quirky fact. In some villages, to this day, clay figurines are found depicting unnamed queens.
No inscriptions.
No kings, just women standing tall, palms open. They're called mothers of the line because names fade, but beginnings are remembered. You return to your chambers and light a small oil lamp. Its flame dances lazily, casting your shadow against the wall. You watch it. Then you raise your hand and your shadow salutes back. Not as queen, not as wife, but as something older, something enduring, something divine. Now, as the final light of this long, ancient night softens into warm glow, you feel the weight of centuries lifting gently from your shoulders. The footsteps of history fade into sand, the sharp edges of power dulling to soft golden curves. You've walked corridors of stone and silence, held your own among gods and ghosts, whispered secrets into the ears of those who shaped the world. And you've survived. You, the listener, who followed this journey through heat, hunger, reverence, and resistance. Rest now in the hush of resilience. Let the scent of frankincense and Nile lilies wrap around you like a silken blanket. Hear the hush of temple bells swaying far beyond reach, calling no one now. Just echoes, just dreams. No matter how fierce the storm, how distant the crown, or how many names history carves away, remember this. The story survives. The flame stays lit. The queen still walks. And tonight, so do you. Through painted halls, through sand-soft tombs, through a world where memory is written in starlight and sealed in stone. So close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your breath follow the river's flow. Let the hush of ancient walls cradle you gently, and the soft murmur of forgotten queens sing you to sleep, because you were shaped by something greater, and you are not forgotten.